Kevin Harvick becomes the first driver since Richard Petty to win Cup Series races on back-to-back days. He and Rodney Childers can basically do no wrong at this point. Today, I'm going to look back at this entire Cup Series weekend from Michigan. We're going to talk about both races and hopefully have some fun while doing it. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. I apologize for not having a video up after yesterday's race. I was out of town. I watched the race but had other things to do and was not able to film and edit and upload a video immediately afterwards. So I figured I'd save all my thoughts from this entire weekend for today's video. So this review episode might be a little bit longer than others. I'm not quite sure yet. We're kind of just going to see how this goes. I have a few categories, a few topics I want to discuss. We'll see how long it takes, but let's go ahead and start with Saturday's race. Just in a nutshell, the key couple of moments, because Kevin Harvick started this weekend off with a bang in that red Busch Beer Apple car. I'll give Busch Beer credit. They have fun with their sponsorship. He's got a new paint scheme almost every week. Here are the results from the first Michigan race. Kevin Harvick, of course, getting the win, and then, as expected, it's Joe Gibbs and Team Penske all behind him. They're coming up just a little bit short. Kevin Harvick had the best car in that race. The only driver that ever looked like he might have something for him was Kyle Busch, but late in this race, Kevin Harvick maybe made contact with Kyle Busch, maybe just got close enough that the air messed up the handling on Busch's car, and Busch slid out of the groove and ended up, well, honestly, he bounced back to finish in the top 5, so it didn't really damage Kyle Busch's car, but certainly a bit of tension there. I thought yesterday's race was pretty good overall. Of course, this is the 550 horsepower rules package, but Michigan International Speedway applied a pretty thick layer of PJ1 to the upper half of the track, and as we saw late in the first race and again here in the second race today, the traction compound certainly came in as the race progressed and really made Michigan like a true 3-groove track, which with this rules package, with the dirty air that the large spoiler creates, you need these tracks to have multiple lanes to choose from. Otherwise, there's just never going to be any passing. But we saw an okay amount of passing throughout the weekend. Definitely livened up in the second half, though, of yesterday's race. As you look at these finishing results here, you'll notice some important names. Bubba Wallace finishing in the top 10. I want to give him a shout out. That's an impressive day for that team. Afterwards, during his interview with NBCSN, he teased a major upcoming announcement, and actually today during race 2's broadcast, it was reported by NBC Sports that Bubba Wallace has a contract with both Richard Petty Motorsports, which includes a 10 to 20% ownership stake, which I guess we already knew, but he also apparently told NBC Sports that he has a contract waiting for him with Chip Ganassi Racing to drive the 42 next year. He's trying to decide which one to choose. Bubba Wallace is transparent perhaps to a fault. I don't know that his management team wants him leaking that information out to the public like this, but we'll do a video later this week. We'll see if an announcement comes later this week, first and foremost, talking about that in more depth. But top 10 finishes like this are huge, of course, for Bubba Wallace going forward. Other important finishers to note regarding the playoff bubble: William Byron entered this race with a 15-point cushion over Tyler Reddick. You see Erik Jones finishing 11th, and he collected stage points in both stage 1 and stage 2. Byron did not. Johnson, I think, got 1 stage point total. Erik Jones, by finishing 11th, ahead of Johnson and ahead of William Byron and ahead of Tyler Reddick, made up a ton of points. Jones went into yesterday's race down 35. He exited down only 16. That was coming into today's race, which we'll get to in just a moment. So a big day yesterday for Erik Jones, of course, the Michigan native who earlier this week was informed he would not be returning to the 20 car for next season. So almost a huge weekend for Erik Jones. A very good start to the weekend. I'm going to save the groovy gauge for the end of this video because honestly my score for both Michigan 1 and Michigan 2 are very similar, so I'm kind of just going to save that for the end. But overall, yesterday's race was solid. So let's fast forward to race 2 because I want to get to my larger points here as quick as possible. Kevin Harvick, of course, swept the weekend. He won both races. Today's race, I would say he clearly had the best car. The only cars maybe comparable to his was his teammate, Aric Almirola, who screwed himself up on the second to last restart by not pitting when everybody else pit because he and his crew chief mixed up their code words. Hot dog meant one thing to Aric Almirola, meant a completely different thing to Billy Scott, or whoever his crew chief is now, or Mike Bugaravich, whatever it is. Is Billy Scott even still with SHR? I don't even know. Anyway, point is, crew chief miscommunication, driver crew chief miscommunication over the word hot dog. Very amusing, I must say. Ooh, did you hear that thunder outside? Don't you dare mess with my audio. Anyway, yeah, I thought Almirola had a car that could compete with Harvick. I also thought Ryan Blaney had a car that could compete with Harvick, but in the middle portion of this race, shortly after restart, Brad Keselowski trying to pass Blaney Blaney for the race lead got loose and just cleaned him out, cleaned his teammate out completely. A hard hit for Brad Keselowski. Of course, the damage on the 12 car also ended Ryan Blaney's day. Just bad luck for Ryan Blaney. Those two Penske drivers finished last and second to last. Big potential hit to Penske's checkbook, but yeah, Brad Keselowski took ownership for the accident. He just had more momentum than he thought he did and couldn't make it stick on the bottom, and unfortunately Ryan Blaney was there to bear the brunt of it as well. So a tough break for those two, but once those guys got taken out, it became the Harvick and Hamlin show. Of course, after Almirola messed up his pit strategy as well, it was once again the H&H battle for the win. And Hamlin, credit to him, made it interesting down the stretch. Those final 10 laps, I thought Harvick was going to drive off with it, but no. Denny Hamlin reeled him in, kept it close, took one or two kind of lunges at him, and just didn't really have time to make it work. And of course, with the rules package the way it is, as long as Harvick kept running that high lane, it was going to be really difficult for Hamlin to make up ground on the bottom and actually pull up alongside and complete the pass. Now, Hamlin did have one opening when Harvick, with 2 to go, missed the exit of turn 2. That was Hamlin's opening. That was Hamlin's chance, and Hamlin unfortunately was unable to take advantage of it. He also kind of slipped up, he said afterwards, and missed his opportunity there. So with all the controversy about this rules package, you can't say Hamlin didn't get a shot to pass Harvick at the end there. He just was unable to make the most of it. But that being said, Kevin Harvick and Rodney Childers, as well as Denny Hamlin and Chris Gabehart, once again proved that those are the two teams to beat week in, week out. Brad Keselowski, the quiet sleeper there, kind of the third wheel, if you will, of course had a strong run going. Harvick's teammate, Eric Almirola, who continues to check off top 5s, top 10s, top 5s. He was bad, awful, as Steve Letarte put it during the broadcast today during race 1. He still finished 15th place yesterday. So Eric Almirola, even when he's bad and awful and terrible, as the NBC broadcast was putting it, he's still decent. So Eric Almirola is a dark horse championship 4 contender at this point, but it's clearly Harvick versus Hamlin. And this is the first big point I want to make in this video. With no practice, with no qualifying, I believe a lot more weight is being put on the crew chiefs this year than maybe ever before, at least any time in recent NASCAR history. Especially at the big, fast tracks like Michigan International Speedway, where it's all about aero, it's all about horsepower. Driver certainly plays a role. Drivers have to pick the right lane at the right time. Drivers got to figure out the restarts. Drivers, of course, play a major role, but it's all about crew chiefs. And I think that goes for many tracks this year, not just the big fast ones, but it's especially prevalent on the big fast tracks. Remember back at Pocono a few weeks back, doubleheader at Pocono, it was Harvick and Hamlin 1-2 both days. And that's because, and remember, we reacted to that poll from that NASCAR Cup Series drivers, active Cup Series drivers took. They were asked, who do you think is the best crew chief in NASCAR right now? And overwhelmingly, they selected Rodney Childers, crew chief for Kevin Harvick. And I would say that matches what my eyes are seeing, and I think Chris Gabehart, he got votes as well. Chris Gabehart, of course, is, I believe, very well respected in the NASCAR Cup Series garage. So I think you can make a serious argument that right now, those are two of the, if not the two best crew chiefs in the NASCAR Cup Series, and especially in the case of Rodney Childers and Kevin Harvick, they have a long-lasting relationship. They've been working together now. This is their 7th year together. Off the top of my head, I don't think there's another driver-crew chief combination in the Cup Series that's been working together longer. I mean, Jimmy and Chad Knaus aren't working together anymore. That was the one I was thinking might give them a run for their money. Penske swapped things up left and right. Maybe one will hit me later on. I mean, Alan Gustafson and Chase Elliott have been together since, what, 2016? I mean, that's probably maybe the second longest pairing. I have no idea. Adam Stevens has been with Kyle Busch for a few years as well, which is why they've run solid and again had a top 5 car in both races this weekend. But I just think with no practice, no qualifying, a lot more pressure lies on the crew chiefs to do their research, to get the setup right away, right at the start. That's my first big idea watching racing this weekend. Let's take a look now at the results for the second race, the race that just got completed. Of course, Harvick, Hamlin 1-2. Joe Gibbs Racing, 3 cars in the top 5. You'll notice Eric Jones is not listed. Eric Jones ran in the top 5, top 6 for a lot of the day, but struggled late in the race, lost the handle on the car. He ended up finishing 27th. It is absolutely catastrophic. That cannot happen. That right there is why I believe the 20 team should be blown up entirely. The pit crew, crew chief, driver, I mean, we already know the driver's gone, but I think that whole team should be completely different come next year. Eric Almirola rebounded from that communication mishap to finish 6th. Once again, that team, I'm telling you, they're an outside threat to win the championship. I'm not saying they're a definite championship 4 contender because they don't have any wins. They don't have a lot of stage points to their credit, but they're running so well right now. They could top 5 their way all the way to Phoenix. My second big thing I want to talk about in this video is Chevrolet. Chevrolet's not good right now. I mean, they're not awful. I wouldn't say they're maybe as bad as they were in 2018, at least Hendrick Motorsports isn't, but Chevy is clearly worse than Ford and Toyota. This is Michigan. Michigan, the Motor City, you know, Detroit, the Motor City here in the United States. This is a super important race to all the manufacturers. They talk about it on the broadcast. All the manufacturers bring their best stuff for these races, and Chevy was just nowhere close to Ford or Toyota. I mean, Harvick dominated. You see Truex, Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Jones at times, Christopher Bell at times today. Toyota was super fast. You saw Eric Almirola, how good he was. 2 Penske cars, 2 Fords, wrecked while racing for the lead today. Where were the Chevys? Where were they? I mean, look, you got Hendrick cars, but they're almost all outside the top 10. I mean, they just weren't a threat. Yesterday, Chase Elliott led briefly on a restart, and I was like, oh, Chase Elliott has a chance of winning this thing. That never lasted. The Chevys just don't have the speed, and I don't know what happened. I'm looking at Alex Bowman especially. Alex Bowman came out of the gate strong this year. He won at Auto Club. He almost won at Las Vegas. Here's a 2-mile track, the closest thing we have to Auto Club. And both races this weekend, he was outside the top 20 for most of the day. Like, what? What changed? Again, this is where I think the crew chief argument comes into play significantly, because you look at Hendrick Motorsports, outside of Alan Gustafson and Chase Elliott, none of those crew chiefs and drivers have a whole lot of experience together. Greg Ives has been hit or miss in his career, and he's working with Alex Bowman, and I think they just, with no practice or qualifying, it rests on the crew chiefs' heads, and they're just not getting it done right now. I don't know, guys. Chevy in general can't seem to hit the side of a barn when it comes to getting the setup right for just any race. Doesn't matter what track, doesn't matter what rules package. The Chevys are just so far off from the Fords and Toyotas consistently. It's just shocking. Obviously, the last 2 or 3 years, really since they introduced the Camaro, Chevy has kind of been behind the 8 ball perhaps. But at the start of this year, before the pandemic, first 4 races, I mean, you had Bowman winning a race, you had Jimmy running top 5, Chase top 5. You know, he blew a tire while leading at Las Vegas, but looked like he might have won that race. I mean, the Chevys looked fantastic to start the year. I just don't know what happened. Anyway, I'll stop dwelling on that because I don't really have any answers here. I just have a lot of questions, I guess. So anyway, we'll move on from that. But those are your top finishing results from the second Michigan race. Next thing I want to address is the choose cone, the choose rule. It's not really a cone, although they did add some cones. They stuck some cones in the side of the fence for today's race because drivers were complaining they couldn't see the triangle on the track after yesterday's race. Anyway, the choose rule. I'm a huge fan. I absolutely love the choose rule for a number of reasons. One, I love that now drivers can't complain that, oh, I got stuck on the bottom for every restart at the end, or oh, I got stuck on the top. You know, at least now drivers can't complain about the fact that they were always in the bad line just because of where they were running. They're always in the bad line restarts. Now, you get the decision. You can maybe lose some track position at first, but get in the preferred line or vice versa. And we saw the choose rule come into play in both yesterday and today's race in a major way. I mentioned Chase Elliott briefly taking the lead in yesterday's race. That's because I think he was 5th, but the top 4 all chose the top yesterday. Chase Elliott was like, shoot, I'll take the front row. He did, and got an amazing restart and actually led for a few laps yesterday. That's the choose rule at play right there. 2nd through 4th place yesterday just didn't trust their cars, I guess, enough to take that risk and start in the front row. Chase Elliott said, screw it, I'll do it, and he made it work. And that creates an outstanding storyline, something that would not have been possible before. Also, I love it because it creates tension between drivers, crew chiefs, and even team owners. We caught on the radio yesterday, Matt McCall, crew chief for Kurt Busch's team, actually going after Chip Ganassi for pestering them on the radio about their lane choices. Team owner Chip Ganassi Racing was told to basically get off the radio entirely because Matt McCall and Kurt Busch were getting frustrated by his micromanaging, you know, him questioning, why are you picking the bottom? Why are you picking the... That's crazy good drama. And I'll give NBCSN a lot of credit. Fox in the truck race earlier this week did a good job, finally, of showing the choose rule in action, but NBC did a fantastic job of explaining and also visually showing the viewers at home what the choose rule is and how it works and how it affects the running order. They put up that graphic to kind of show you where the drivers were running before they chose their lane, and then you could look on the track and see, oh, Kyle Busch is 7th now. He was 4th. Oh, interesting how the choose rule works. If you were a fan, and I got a lot of comments on my videos because I tried to sort of explain what the choose rule was. I tried to verbally explained it as best I could, but I got a lot of comments of from people who still were a little bit confused by it, understandably so. I would think most viewers, most fans, after watching the races this weekend would have a very strong understanding of the choose rule and how it works, and I think that's great. I think the broadcast deserves a lot of credit for focusing on it the way they did, describing it, explaining it the way they did, and I think it just added another great layer to the race, a new layer of strategy. And not some BS strategy like, oh, we're gonna stay out and hope for the caution, you know, like where it's completely reliant on luck. No, here, you make your own luck. If you got a car that you think you can run the bottom with, take the front row like Chase Elliott did yesterday, and you have a shot at racing for the lead because everyone else was too scared to try. Like, that's such good drama. I don't know, the fact that we heard crew chiefs and drivers kind of arguing back and forth about what lane to choose, like, maybe this isn't going to be great for, meetings on Monday and Tuesday for the race teams. Maybe drivers are going to be a little testy about it and crew chiefs and all that. But for fans watching at home, we need more drama. So I love the choose rule. I'm glad that it's here to stay, at least for the remainder of this year. Remember, they're using the choose rule at every track, every race, except the 2 super speedways and the road courses. So every other, intermediate and short track oval, we will see the choose rule. Xfinity Trucks Cup, I love it. I'm glad it's here. Of course, I'll wait and see how this progresses over the year. As the year goes on, maybe games start being played, maybe it overstays its welcome and we'll reassess before 2021. But as of right now, I love it. I'll be curious to know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below if you like the choose rule, if you think the choose rule is already, oh my goodness, you guys hear that thunder, right? Anyway, let me know what you guys think of the choose rule. Now, speaking of much needed drama, before we put this race on the Groovy Gauge, I do want to talk about the rivalry that's brewing between Denny Hamlin and Kevin Harvick, the 2 clear frontrunners for the 2020 title. I get a lot of comments, I get a lot of messages, tweets at me, things like that from people who are frustrated watching the same 2 drivers essentially dominate week in, week out. And it does raise the question that's been asked many times historically, is this kind of dominance good or bad for the sport in general? If you're a fan of Harvick, if you're a fan of Hamlin, I'm sure you're loving this season. I'm sure you're super excited to tune in every single weekend because you know your guy's going to be contending for the win most likely. But for fans of other drivers or people like me who kind of just watch the entire race just to feel the race and see what happens, yeah, it does get a little stale. I mean, I'm not going to lie. But is it actually bad for the sport? I mean, NASCAR survived 5 straight years of Jimmy Johnson winning the title. I think fans say they hate watching somebody dominate, and I think that can be true when it's one team, one driver, one competitor. If it's one person dominating the entire league, yeah, I believe it can get stale. But the fact that this year it's 2 drivers, 2, I would say, very hungry drivers. And I would say 2 very hungry drivers because, statistically speaking, I think both drivers have underachieved for their careers. Kevin Harvick, of course, just tied Rusty Wallace for like 10th or 11th on the all-time wins list, so I don't mean he's underachieved in that way, but Kevin Harvick should have more than 1 championship. Harvick should have 2 or 3 championships by now. Denny Hamlin should definitely have a championship by now, but of course they've fallen apart at the worst possible time multiple times in his career, so he is championship list. So you have a driver in Denny Hamlin who's won every race there is to win pretty much, but doesn't have a championship, versus Kevin Harvick, who's also won and won more than Denny Hamlin, but he only has 1 championship during, a 6-7 year span where it feels like he's been like a top 3 driver every single year. Like, the fact that Harvick does not have more championships is surprising to me, and I'll be honest, I'll bet wears at him a little bit. So you have these 2 drivers going head to head, 2 of the best drivers in NASCAR today currently, without a doubt. My only complaint, my only issue with this rivalry, and honestly, the reason I think a lot of fans are bored by it a little bit, is because the 2 drivers, at least, and crew chiefs and everything, are just too freaking nice to each other. I mean, you had Denny Hamlin, a few weeks back at Pocono, after, Hamlin won 1 race and Harvick won the other race that weekend. Afterwards, you had Denny Hamlin basically singing Harvick a love song, praising him like there's no other competitor I'd rather do battle with. He's super respectful on the racetrack, like he's a great hard competitor. Like, shut up, Hamlin. I want you to talk about how much you hate that Harvick keeps beating you. I want you to be upset. Like today, he wasn't upset that he finished second. He was a little bummed out, but I want to see emotion. And I know Denny Hamlin can show emotion. The dude freaking sent Corey LaJoie a threatening text message earlier this year because LaJoie was mouthing off a little bit on Twitter. I know Denny Hamlin can show raw emotion when he needs to, but it feels like neither Hamlin or Harvick are really at odds with each other. Honestly, if you looked at it from afar, you'd think the 2 of them were teammates. I mean, honestly, I just feel like the lack of tension between Harvick and Hamlin is the only thing bringing this rivalry, bringing this season down a little bit and making it not feel like the stakes are very high. I swear, if I have to listen to or read another interview from either Harvick or Hamlin where they talk about how great of a competitor the other guy is and continue to sing them high praise, I'm gonna throw up. Like, that's not what NASCAR was built on. NASCAR blew up in the 90s because you had Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt, who, they didn't like hate each other. They weren't like threatening to beat each other up every week, but they clearly did not see eye to eye. Clearly 2 kind of different cultures clashing right there, and fans ate that up because that's great television, that's great drama. When you have the 2 best drivers in the series right now just talking about how great each other are, that's not fun to watch. That's absolutely not fun to watch, and it doesn't really give me anyone to root for. So if I have any complaint about this season and the kind of big 2, as some people are calling it, it's the fact that they're just too nice to each other. I like, when Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski, or Kyle Busch and Joey Logano, or Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano, when they've had rivalries in recent years and they've had disagreements on and off the racetrack, I want to see those guys race for the championship against each other. I don't want to see 2 drivers who are agreeing with each other and talking about how great each other are all the time. No, I want to see 2 drivers that don't have to hate each other. They don't have to absolutely despise the other driver's guts. But I do not want to see 2 drivers who like each other battling for the championship. That was the problem in 2013 when you had Matt Kenseth and Jimmy Johnson down the stretch. The two drivers are like best friends off the track. Riding bikes together, going on runs, running marathons together. Like, it just made the end of the 2013 season just anticlimactic because you didn't really feel like either driver really had a burning desire to beat the other driver. I hope this makes sense, but that's my problem this year, and that's something that, you can't really, force drama. You can't infuse, bad blood between two guys. You can't manufacture it, but it's the one thing this year that is a little disappointing and kind of takes the air out of my sails is all these times where I hear Hamlin say like, oh man, Kevin Harvick, Rodney Childers, they're really good competitors. Every time I hear that, I just think, God, I want to fall asleep. Anyway, with that all being said, I just want to get off my chest because I've been thinking about that for a few weeks and it really came to a head today. Let's put this race on the groovy gauge. This has been a long enough episode. I'm all over the place. All right, so I thought Saturday's race was a little bit more entertaining than today's race. Today's race, the first two stages, just not much happened. There's some passing, but given the fact that the field was inverted, I thought we'd see a lot more passing in the first stage, and we really didn't. We saw a lot of guys stall out. A lot of passing in yesterday's race, so if I kind of evened the two out, both races I think ended pretty dramatically. You had a lot of crashes and restarts at the end of yesterday's race. You had a few spins in this race, and great battle at the end between Hamlin and Harvick. Overall, if I kind of balance the two together, both races I think get very similar scores. I'm going to give this weekend overall a 65% on the groovy gauge. Not great racing this weekend for the most part, but pretty good racing, pretty fun to watch. I will say, watching this rules package at Michigan is kind of uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to watch the racing sometimes, just because there's so much aero at play, there's so much dirty air that plays a factor, but the PJ1 helped widen the groove out, helped limit some of the effects of dirty air, allow drivers to make moves on each other more so than they would have perhaps otherwise, but still just kind of uncomfortable racing overall, but not bad. I'll give it a 65% overall. Yesterday's race, Saturday, was a little bit better than Sunday. It was more entertaining at least, but that's just me. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I appreciate you guys watching this video. I know it was a little different, a little more sporadic than my normal race review episodes, but these are supposed to be kind of in-the-moment reactions to races I just watched, and it's a little different in this case because one of the races I talked about happened 24 hours ago, but I hope you enjoyed. Thank you all for watching. Of course, stay tuned for later this week. I'll have more regularly formatted Out of the Group episodes. We have a lot of things to talk about just from this weekend. I still have some stuff from last week I want to catch up on. I just have not had the time. There's been so much news lately, but thank you all for watching. I will see you all again very, very soon. Of course, subscribe if you are new. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. Of course, a big time thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters. Could not do this show without your support. I will see you all tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend.